Hey everyone, and welcome back to Be Like Christ. Today we are starting a brand new study in the book of 1 Samuel. This is a really interesting book, a lot of well-known Bible characters and Bible stories. So we're going to talk about all of them. David, Saul, Samuel, the kings of Israel. Israel's going to get his first king after the period of the judges. So there's a ton to talk about. I think there's like 31 chapters in 1 Samuel. So we will do our best to cover all of the material, and Lord willing, we will. I will say that if this is your first time with us and you've never done one of our studies before, there's a free PDF. You're going to see it up on the screen. You can download it for free on our website. And it has all the information that I'm going to be talking about. We make one of these every single day for our study. And in the future, hopefully we'll have books on Amazon where you can just buy all of these outlines rather than print them off or have to go get them online. When those are available, there will be a link down in the description. I'm finishing up the first 5 right now, so hopefully it's been a long process, but hopefully I'll get those done, mostly because of other things that have been going on in life. We try to cover all the material in about 5 minutes. I really tried to be a little bit more concise in these outlines than I was in Judges, because in Judges and Ruth we ran over time almost every time, so I'm going to really try to do a better job on these. With all that said, we'll take a look at our outline, and we try to answer the same basic questions in each one of these chapters. The first is, when did these events happen historically? Where did they happen geographically? Who are the main historical characters who play a key role in the chapter? And then we do an outline where we break the chapter down into its major sections and talk about the highlights. And then we try to take an application. We can take this old story from the Bible and how do we make application to our lives? What can we learn from it and live out the Christian life and to become more like Christ more and more every day? So let's go ahead and jump in. Let's answer our first question. When historically on the timeline of the world did these events happen? We're going to talk about a guy named Samuel. You may have guessed that because of the title of the book, but most scholars place the birth of Samuel somewhere between 1100 BC and 1070 BC. Remember, BC time moves backwards. It goes down to 0. So that's a span of about 30 years between 1100 BC and 1070 BC. My current date, if I had to guess, would be around 1080 BC. Samuel is the final judge of Israel. We talked about the judges and the period of the judges in the books of Ruth, the books of Judges, obviously, and now part of the book of 1 Samuel is also going to be in that period of the Judges. Most scholars place the period of the Judges somewhere between 1450 BC and 1000 BC. Who are the main characters of this chapter? We're going to talk about a guy named Elkanah. Elkanah was from the tribe of Levi, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and he lived with his family in the hill country of Ephraim. Then we're going to talk about Peninnah and Hannah. These were the 2 wives of Elkanah. And then Eli. Eli is kind of a big character. He was a judge of Israel, traditionally considered the 14th judge of Israel, if you take the 15 judge list. He was a priest who served God at the tabernacle. And then Samuel. Samuel was the firstborn son of Hannah, and he grew up in Shiloh with Eli, learning to serve the Lord at the tabernacle. Now let's pop up to our map, and it's quite detailed because we got all these cities on here from the book of Judges, but let's talk about where these events took place. Elkanah, Peninnah, and Hannah lived in Ramah, which is kind of smushed between Gibeah and Mizpah. You'll see it there on the map. The tabernacle of God. If you don't know what the tabernacle was, it was a tent where God's presence dwelled, where sacrifices were offered. It had been built by Moses many hundreds of years before this. But it was a mobile structure. It was a tent that could be moved around. And during these days, it was located in Shiloh. Now let's move over to our more concise outline and try to break this chapter down into the important sections. So I've got it broken down into 2 sections. Verses 1 through 20 is the first section, the birth of Samuel. So there was a man named Elkanah who had 2 wives, Peninnah and Hannah. Peninnah had borne Elkanah several sons and daughters, several children. However, Hannah was barren, and the text tells us that the Lord had closed her womb, so she wasn't able to have any children. And Peninnah was really quite mean to Hannah about this, and she made fun of her because she was childless, and this made her feel terrible, obviously. Every year, this little family would go to Shiloh to offer sacrifices at the tabernacle, and on their annual visit, Hannah was distressed, and she went to the tabernacle to pray to God, to ask God to give her a son. And she made a promise to God, a vow there, that if he gave her a son, she would give her son back to him. Now Eli, the priest, was there watching over the tabernacle, and he observed Hannah, and he noticed that her mouth was moving, but there wasn't any sound coming out. So he interpreted this as Hannah must be a drunk woman. And so he went up to her, he confronted her, and he told her, he kind of, rebuked her and said, how long are you going to be drunk? Put your wine away. But Hannah clarified that she wasn't drunk. She was actually pouring out her soul to God, and she was praying within her heart, even though there weren't actually words coming out of her mouth. Realizing his foolishness, he ended up blessing Hannah, and he expressed his desire that God would answer her prayer. And that's exactly what happened. Hannah, Elkanah, and Peninnah went back to their home in Ramah, and Elkanah and Hannah conceived a son. And when the son was born, they called him Samuel. So Hannah now has her son. Is she going to keep her vow to the Lord? And in what way is she going to do that? That's what we're going to talk about in verses 20 through 28. Hannah gives Samuel back to the Lord. Hannah kept Samuel until he was weaned, and then she took him to Shiloh, and she offered sacrifices to God, and then she took her son to Eli the priest. She told Eli about her vow and how God had answered her prayer and had given her a son. And she gave her son, she gave Samuel to Eli to be raised there at the tabernacle. And that's exactly what happened. Eli took him. The boy was dedicated to the service of the Lord, and Eli taught him how to serve God there in Shiloh. It was quite an incredible thing that Hannah did, and an amazing display of what it looks like to keep your promises. So now let's talk about our final section on the outline, and that is our application section. We know very little about the lives of 99.9% of people. We should be slow to assume bad things about other people when we don't know anything about them or their past or their experiences. Eli gives us a great example of why this is a mistake in this chapter. Eli assumed that Hannah was a drunk, when in fact, Hannah was a very virtuous woman. Eli interpreted the details of the scene playing out in front of him very poorly. How did he come to his interpretation that Hannah must be a drunk? Well, we don't know exactly, but maybe it was his interpretation was shaped by his past experiences, things that he had seen in the past. But it wasn't shaped by a knowledge of Hannah's past. And that's where he really went wrong. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 2, "For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." And so if we are harsh on other people, then we're going to be judged very harshly. If we assume bad things about other people all the time and we look down on them for that, that's going to end up returning on us. So we want to be very careful not to judge other people out of our ignorance. So thanks for joining us for our very first study in the book of 1 Samuel. We have a long ways to go. Probably take us about a month to get through this book, but I'm sure, Lord willing, we will do it, and we'll progress on through the Old Testament. The goal of these studies is to go all the way through the Bible. We've already covered all the books from Genesis to now 1 Samuel. So if you want to look up any of those, the outlines and the videos are already online, and you can do that. So just so you know, if this is your first time with us, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of you who watch every single day and leave comments and leave corrections on my videos. I don't mind when people correct something that's wrong. It actually helps because it helps me in the editing process. And a few of you have remarked on some little mistakes that exist in the outline, so I appreciate that. So anyway, we're over 5 minutes. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be under 5 minutes. I hope. Okay, bye.